everyone. I'm Barbara Ham-Lee. When George Floyd cried out for his mama as he died under the knee of Derek Chauvin, mothers cried. They cried at the realization that it could have been their son or daughter. But for many Black mothers, Floyd's cry resonates on an entirely different level. It painfully reminds them of the many talks on how to deal with police, the sleepless nights pacing the floor until their son comes home safely, the comforting of other mothers whose sons fall victim to police brutality and racism. Up next on Another View, Black Motherhood and Race with author Desiree Cooper. Stay tuned. Another View is next, right after this news from NPR.
Discussing today's topics from an African-American perspective, this is Another View.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Another View. I'm Barbara Ham-Lee. Writer, author, caretaker, community activist, former attorney, and overall great person, Desiree Cooper will be with us shortly to share her personal story of being a mom of a Black son during this racial pandemic we find ourselves in. But first, we mourn the deaths of two civil rights icons. Both Reverend C.T. Vivian and Congressman John Lewis passed away on July 17. Reverend Vivian spent 6 decades of his life fighting for civil rights and is most famously known for his confrontation with Sheriff Jim Clark on the steps of the Selma, Alabama courthouse as he as others worked to register Black people to vote. He said, and I quote, "You can turn your back now and you can keep the club in your hand, but you cannot beat down justice. And we will register to vote because as citizens of these United States, we have the right to do it." Reverend Vivian was a leader in the SCLC and a close advisor to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He was 95 years old and he died of natural causes. Congressman John Lewis was born the son of sharecroppers. Lewis's journey to stomp out racial injustice began as a young man who organized voter registration drives and mobilized protesters. His chosen path would also lead him to decades of public service as a United States congressman. Our Lisa Godley takes a look at John Lewis's legendary life.
Oh, freedom.
John Lewis was a teenager when he left his family's Alabama cotton farm and became immersed in the civil rights movement. His work would start as one of the student leaders determined to desegregate the city of Nashville. Lewis helped found the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, also known as SNCC, a group committed to bringing about change through nonviolence.
We must say, wake up, America, wake up, for we cannot stop, and we will not and cannot be patient.
As a student at Nashville's Fisk University, he was one of the original freedom riders. He helped stage sit-ins and helped organize many pivotal marches, including the March on Washington and Bloody Sunday. In this interview, he describes that historic walk across Selma's Edmund Pettus Bridge.
When we arrived at the apex of the Edmund Pettus Bridge, we saw a sea of blue Alabama state troopers. About 600 of us walking in twos. It was a very peaceful, orderly protest. Well, I had no idea that we would be beaten, that we would be trampled or tear gassed. I thought we all would be arrested and jailed.
This march will not continue. Troopers here advance toward the group. See that they disperse.
John Lewis was the first one hit. What happened to Lewis and the other nonviolent protesters was broadcast on national television and resulted in a public outcry to defy segregation and pave the way for African Americans to be granted their constitutional right to vote. John Lewis would later describe Bloody Sunday as a defining moment in the civil rights movement.
The days after Bloody Sunday, there was demonstration, nonviolent protests in more than 80 major cities in America. People didn't like what they saw happening there. There was a sense that we had to do something, we had to do it now. We literally, in my estimation, wrote the Voting Rights Act with our blood and with our feet.
John Lewis's activism resulted in him being arrested more than 40 times, arrests that were often preceded by physical attacks and resulted in serious injuries. But Lewis refused to slow down, his actions applauded for helping bring an end to legalized racial segregation. After leaving SNCC, Lewis continued working to enfranchise minorities. In the late 1960s, he was appointed director of the Voter Education Program, which under his leadership registered close to 4 million minority voters. In the early 1980s, he was elected to the Atlanta City Council and 5 years later as a United States representative to Georgia's 5th Congressional District, an office he held for 34 years. John Lewis co-authored a New York Times best-selling graphic novel memoir titled March and received numerous awards throughout his career, including the highest civilian honor, the Presidential Medal of Freedom by President Barack Obama in 2011. John Lewis passed away on July 17th after suffering from pancreatic cancer. He was 80 years old. He was preceded in death by his wife of 44 years, Lillian Mills Lewis, and is survived by his son, John Miles Lewis. He will be remembered as a civil rights icon and a genuine American hero.
My philosophy is very simple. When you see something that is not right, not fair, not just, say something, do something, get in trouble, good trouble, necessary trouble.
And today we continue with the good trouble, the necessary trouble. Rest in peace, John Lewis and Reverend C.T. Vivian. Desiree Cooper is a 2015 Kresge Artist Fellow, a former attorney, Pulitzer Prize-nominated journalist, and community activist. She's the author of Know the Mother. Recently, she wrote an article called Arrest Record, where she talks about her grown son and how he is coping with life since the death of George Floyd. We are so happy to have Desiree back with us here on Another View. Desiree, how you doing?
I'm hanging in there. How you doing, Barbara?
Yeah, I'm hanging in there too. That's exactly what we're doing. Are these some crazy times or what? You know, but when I hear John Lewis say, get in trouble, get in good trouble, you know, we've got to make changes and things are starting to happen. Would you not agree?
I agree. And it's one miracle for him to have lived to see Barack Obama be president. I'm feeling gratified that he lived to see this moment, the post-George Floyd, month. Because, I could imagine him thinking, wow, we did not make enough good trouble and things didn't change enough. And I'm sure he's left this world feeling like, oh, okay, we're going to get there, we're going to get there. So... amazing man.
Absolutely. Well, you wrote an article, an essay, I call it, called Arrest Record, and it appears on the Rumpus. And those of you who may not be familiar with the Rumpus, they say it is a place where people come to be themselves through their writing, to tell their stories or speak their minds in the most artful and authentic way they know how. We strive to be a platform for marginalized voices and writing that might not find a home elsewhere, and to lift up new voices alongside those of more established writers we love. And so I know you're one of those established writers that they love, but what was going through your mind when you said, I've got to sit down and I've got to tell this story?
Oh, that is a very good question. So I am sitting here in isolation with my senior parents, who are both 86 and have Alzheimer's. And in January, my adult son left Detroit and came to live with me. At the time, he was ill, and he just needed more around-the-clock support. I'm like, well, I'm running a nursing home. Just come on down. So he had just kind of gotten back on his feet, doing really, really well. And then the pandemic comes, and we find we're all here quarantined together. He's immunocompromised. My parents are elderly. I'm a senior. I'm 60. And we start watching the pandemic, as you said, the pandemic of racism unfold before our eyes. And my dad is like CNN nonstop, and so it's on all day, all night. And I'm sitting here next to my son, and we're watching it, and I'm realizing that both of us are feeling very, very triggered. I'm triggered, of course, when George Floyd called for his mother. Me and all the other mothers who heard that felt their hearts snatch.
Mm-hmm.
And it made me think about the many times my son had called for me. He grew up in Detroit, and he had run-ins with the police many times, as most Black men have.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was thinking about that, and he was thinking about the times he'd been on the business side of a nightstick, right?
Wow.
And thinking like, whoa, and so he's being triggered. And we both said, what can we do? Like, we're sitting here, we can't go anywhere. We can't participate in a march. We can make phone calls or whatever. And it's so funny because at that point, something showed up on social media that talked about the different roles people can have in social movements. And one of the pieces of the pie was storyteller, and one of the pieces of pie was healer.
Mm.
And I said, you know what, Jay? I think this is my role. I'm storyteller. And he looked at it and goes, I think my role is healer. And I said,
Wow.
well, then can I tell your story of what you've been through? Will you tell me so that I can tell others? And so we sat down, and for the first time, he's 32, we talked about what it was like for him. He talked, I listened. The times that he had run-in with the police, as a parent, I was only thinking, where's your car? Are you okay? Yeah, we got the money. We'll be right there. Someone will call your job. Don't worry about it. We were in fixing, repair. It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. And then when it was over, it's all about, okay, let's keep it moving,
Right.
I don't ever remember sitting with him and saying, are you going to be okay? What were you feeling? What was it like? I don't even know if I could hear it, actually.
I'm going to read a passage from the essay a little bit later, but I want to set it up first because I want people to understand the depth and the breadth of what you and Jay did and talked about, because there are a variety of experiences here that really kind of build upon themselves to culminate in his ultimate feelings, and he's still conflicted, as he talks about, but I know there are good cops out there. And so it's just a very interesting read. And if you haven't had a chance to read it, you can go to the Rumpus and look it up. By Desiree Cooper. It's called An Arrest Record. So let's start with the beginning, when the Blockbuster event and what happened to your family then. This was back when Jay was a small child.
He was back when there were Blockbusters.
Yeah, back when there were, exactly. How about that? Back when there were Blockbusters.
Yeah, this is like late 1990s. And we used to make it a family thing. We were living in Detroit. There were no Blockbusters within the city limits. We made it a thing, like on Friday nights, to get in the car. We'd go to the near suburbs and go to Blockbuster, get our little movies and stuff for the weekend, get something to eat, and go and nestle in for the weekend. And so this one time, over the course of time, the kids got hip, and they're like, well, we don't want a movie. We actually want this action toy, or we actually want all this candy, or, whatever they had up front to snatch the kids' attention. That's what they went for. And we will always say, no, a movie. And then we're going to go eat. That's it. So this one time, Jay decides he wants an action figure. We tell him no. We get our movies, we leave, and as soon as we're out, Jay starts to giggle, and he holds up the action figure. He has shoplifted this thing. So one thing I talk about is like the broken windows rule of parenting that a lot of Black parents do, and that is, you crack down really hard on the smaller infractions so that the bigger ones don't happen. We're on some level, we're even thinking about our kids being seen as future criminals. And so you can't even one step over, because we don't know how far that slide is going. So as parents of a black boy, we marched him back into Blockbuster, and we asked for the manager, and we made Jay apologize. And she was humiliated. He was crying, and, but he got through his apology. And the
How old
manager
was he,
listened.
Des? How old was he?
He was about 9 or 10.
9 or 10. Okay.
Mm-hmm. And the manager looked, who was a white man, the manager looked and said, he picked up the phone, and he goes, "I'm calling the police." And we were like, "What? What are you doing?" And the manager's like, "Well, he shoplifted. I'm calling the police." And
Wow.
we were, what? I mean, could you, here's a kid, he's being brought back into the store to confess his crime by his very parents, two parents. The stereotype is,
that you would be a single mom.
Yes, exactly. We're scrub clean and blah, blah, blah. And I'm saying this because these are the things that they tell us. Be nice, be polite, be clean, don't resist, blah, blah, blah. We're doing everything by the book. And this man is going to call the cops on a 10-year-old.
Wow.
Who's there with his parents. So we got in the car. We drove away, and literally, this kid is far more traumatized than we ever met. The only trauma was supposedly for him to confess that he had stolen and not to do it again. Mm-hmm. We did not know that he would have further trauma of being threatened to go to jail for it, really threatened to go to jail for it. And we were kind of watching the rearview mirror the whole time. Like, are there going to be police sirens behind us? Did they get our license plate? And that did not happen. But for us to settle down as parents and think, we almost got our son arrested over trying to train him to be a good person.
And
really?
If I recall, I believe I read on a post either from the story or it was on your Facebook page. I can't remember, but a white person was talking about a similar experience that they had in the store with taking their kid back, but nobody talked about calling the police.
Right.
It was
Absolutely.
Here's a lesson learned, young man, young woman, don't do this again. So as opposed to, why you wrote in your essay, you say a black boy, no matter how young, was not a child. He was a future criminal. This whole notion of thinking of our children as A, older than they are, and B, that whatever they're doing, it's got to be nefarious, and it can't be, as you said, two parents trying to teach him a lesson. He's not the only child that's ever shoplifted.
Right. And actually, I kind of almost thought that is a rite of passage for kids to be marched back into a store by their parent to apologize. I'm not saying that happens to everyone, but that is not unusual. I think that happens, fairly frequently, that kids get caught shoplifting and they're forced to take the merchandise back and apologize for it. What was this man thinking?
Yeah, and what was his reaction when your husband said, "Wait, what? What are you doing?" And what was his reaction? Did he just keep dialing, or did he say anything to you all?
No, my memory is that he kept dialing, and we left. That's my memory. We didn't have a lot of conversation at that point because then the threat was even higher for us and our child. So we weren't going to hang around. Yeah.
So fast forward, there was a case in Detroit, or in the Detroit area, where an 11-year-old boy was arrested for murder. And you decided to cover it. You were a publisher of a newspaper at that time?
Yeah, I was an editor of a news weekly at the time. And the kid was 1 year older than my son, Jay. The kid's name was Nathaniel Abraham. This is about 1997, and it was during the time in the entire United States where people talked about the coming wave of super predators, that America was younger. There was a big young bubble coming through the system, And a lot of these kids were like the crack babies, and they're in depressed urban areas. And so this tide of super predators was coming. And across the United States, they did things like build punk prisons just for young serious offenders. They kept lowering the age at which kids could be tried as adults for serious crime. And so Michigan had just passed a law earlier in 1997, and went into effect in 1997, that said that children who committed certain serious crimes, among which were rape and murder, could be tried as an adult, no matter their age.
Wow.
So the cases would come before, if they were underage, they would come before a juvenile court, and the juvenile court would decide whether to flip the case over to adult criminal court or not. So it would be case by case, but the judge had that discretion to try a child of any age as an adult for a serious crime. Nathaniel Abraham was out shooting a gun in late 1997. It was at night. His mother was working overnight at a lab. According to Nathaniel, he shot the gun, randomly in the air, and it struck a 19-year-old across a field and killed him. And the 19-year-old was also a Black young man. And they charged Nathaniel at the age of 11 as an adult for murder.
Wow. At
that time, he became the youngest person ever in the United States tried for murder as an adult. That includes the Jim Crow era.
And he had some developmental issues also, didn't he?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. He was a disturbed kid. He was in special education, so he did have learning issues, but he also had an emotional disability. He was a troubled kid, and his mother, speaking of my experience, his mother had actually called the police on him before. His mother had called saying that I need help. I can't seem to control him. What can we do? Are there programs? Of course, there weren't any. And he never got school. There was a school psychologist that he never saw. He saw like maybe twice and never saw again. So the support system, for people, an adventurous kid whose parents have money might do things like learn how to water ski or, there's a lot of physical adventurous ways to channel behaviors and energy. And this woman did not have those resources. So he was tried. I decided I was caught up in the case because this kid's the same age as my kid and had the biggest doe eyes you've ever seen. He looked like a kid. He was kind of scrawny. He looked younger than 11. And I followed the trial. I wrote the story, and then it came time to decide what the cover image would be. And I knew for sure what I wanted. I wanted a black kid's hands, like maybe wearing a jersey, his hands handcuffed in front of him, holding a teddy bear. Like that's what I had in my head. But here's the thing, Barbara. What Black mother would I approach to say, can we use your son for a photo shoot to represent Nathaniel Abraham, which everyone knew that name in the area.
Right.
And we're going to put him in handcuffs on the cover of our magazine.
And we're not going to show his face, but still.
Yeah, but still, like, can I borrow your son for that?
Yeah.
You know, there's no way I could do that. So I had a conversation with my husband, and we said, well, if Jay is up to it, fine. We're not going to show the face. If I can't ask any other woman to do it, then I have to do it. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I wouldn't ask them to do something I wouldn't be willing to do. So that's what we did.
And what happened on the day of the shoot?
So I was nervous.
As a matter of
Jay
fact,
was-
Desiree, hold on one second before you go into that, because this is a really critical part of our conversation. Let me do this. If you're just joining us, we're talking about African American mothers and their hopes, fears, and desires for their children in light of racism in America. Our guest is former attorney, Pulitzer Prize nominated journalist, community activist, and author Desiree Cooper. Her book is called Know the Mother, and her latest essay is entitled Arrest Record. So 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. If you'd like to call to ask a question or talk to Desiree, we would gladly take your call. 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. Okay, so you have decided, you and your husband said it's okay. We're going to ask Jay to be the model for the photograph that would accompany this article about an 11-year-old boy who had been arrested and tried for murder. Okay, so what happened at the photo shoot?
Now listen to what you just said. The model for an 11-year-old kid who had been arrested and tried for murder. I'm putting my son in those shoes. So I was really not doing well with the idea, but I was committed to the story, and I felt like the story needed to be told.
Mm-hmm.
So Jay is a big fat nerd. Okay. I mean, he is just like a goofy little boy. So he's thinking, and this is like when gangster rap was at its height. And while I didn't ascribe it much in my home, at all in my home, but, you know, it's in the world. So he's thinking thug life. You know, I'd explained to him all this. He'd heard about Nathaniel's story. He's going to be cool for a change. Thug life, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So we get there. He's very excited, you know. We put the handcuffs on him, and almost immediately with that click, first of all, I almost died. But his demeanor changed. It's like, whoa, okay, this is not real fun. And we took a few shots, and he was getting more and more uncomfortable and irritable. He's a really good-natured kid. And finally, he just said, "This hurts. Can you just take these off? Can you take them off?" And I was like, "Take them off." Like, whether we got the shot or not, I just couldn't take it anymore. And I was really upset. And Jay was not feeling like himself. It just something went in his mind.
When it
which,
happened.
Of course, we had never debriefed, right? So I don't know what happened, but he wasn't himself. And the photographer was fantastic. And he just took Jay around his studio and started showing him things and playing with it. And when we were leaving, he said, "You know, are you okay?" And I'm just like, no, this is not good. I just kept thinking. I said to him, you know, if Jay should ever end up, you know, in a run-in with the law, I'm just thinking about, will he remember that it was his mother who first put him in handcuffs?
Yeah, you said, I want to read the passage from your essay. You say, when the cuffs clinked around his wrist, we both were jolted into reality. My stomach jittered and tears welled. It felt like I was seeing the future, his inevitable run-in with the police, that rite of passage reserved for so many black men without regard to their innocence. He tried to cooperate, but it was soon clear that the cuffs didn't feel like he'd expected. The cool steel began to cut against his dark skin as he stood in the studio spotlight. After a few shots, he said, "I want these off." "That's enough," I said, my heart pounding. "Take them off." And later on, you say, "I shook my head." The photographer asked, "Are you okay?" And you said, "I shook my head. I was far from it. I couldn't help but think that if Jay was ever really arrested, he would remember his mother was the first person to put him in cuffs." Did you ever think about that after the incident was over and after, you know, life kind of goes on? Or was it now that all this comes back to you?
No, I won't say I thought about it every day.
Yeah.
But it was in there. It was in there a long time. Yeah, part of me was hoping that it really wasn't something, you know, that he would dwell on. Like, I was overthinking. That's what I was hoping. in my mind, that I was overthinking that situation, and that as time went on, it would have no importance to him.
Hmm. So I'm going to fast forward because and there's so much to this article. I really hope people will go and read it and understand. But we only have an hour, so I want to move on now. You know, you had said that Jay had some encounters with the police. Some that you know about, some that you didn't. Once when he was working a suburban neighborhood as a door-to-door solicitor for a home repair company, someone called the cops on him. He'd been arrested for a blown headlight. Once when he was stopped for expired tags, the cops called in reinforcements from another jurisdiction. So he has experienced this. After George Floyd's death, you two decided that you needed to get out and just take a ride. And you thought taking a ride to the beach would be a great idea. But something happened. Mm-hmm. What happened?
Well, part of this is being a city boy. The closer we got to the beach, we went back roads sort of from Chesapeake to Virginia Beach. And he got more and more nervous. He was not comfortable going into more and more rural settings. Mm-hmm. And we stopped at a kind of a roadside restaurant, and there was outside dining, there was outside tents. You know, it was safe for us to go and just get some crab cakes or something. Mm-hmm. And the whole time he was so uncomfortable. His ears were in all the conversations around us, like he was just waiting to hear the N-word or hear something weird so that we could get out of there. He had to go to the restroom, and when he came back, so we were all outside. To go to the restroom, of course, you've got to go now through this kind of empty building to go to the restroom. And when he came back, I said, "Did you find the restrooms?" He goes, "Yeah, I was too far. That was just too far." So, you know, he just felt like he was going into the bowels by himself of a building. Now, this is a 30-year-old man, but just completely uncomfortable in whiteness, just completely uncomfortable in whiteness and expecting terrible things to happen to him. Go ahead.
I was going to say, and he did not grow up in a all-black neighborhood. I mean, it's not like he hasn't been exposed to living around white people and interacting with white people all along. I mean, your family was a middle-class family, right?
Right. I mean, one thing about Detroit is you can't define it by class.
Yeah, that's
because
true.
Everyone's black, and everyone, you know, there's very, very wealthy black people, very, very wealthy middle-class people. Detroit is a black city. But being who we are, we lived a very integrated life. I mean, his friends were from India. You know, his friends were white. His friends were black. His school settings were not always all black. So you're right. I mean, he was very comfortable and very experienced with being actually the only black in some spaces that he was in, and interacting with white people. That was not a problem. He was definitely hyper vigilant, and it was definitely, I mean, I'm not a psychologist, but there was a bit of PTSD happening in that moment. This was in the heat of the Floyd murder, and this was all we were processing. And he was behaving like he had PTSD.
You said, Desiree, in the essay, you said, "I kept telling him it was okay. He tried to trust me. He wanted to trust me, but he already knew what all black men know. When they are being hunted, their mothers can't save them."
Right. I'm sure he thought if we were pulled over, you know, actually it was the other way around. It was probably something like, how can I protect me and my mother? You know?
Wow.
He's being the black man, and he knows that it's probably going to go poorly. And here we are in a rural area. What if a white cop? In fact, a turtle was in the road, and all these cars had stopped. And so we were in a bit of a traffic jam, and I kept looking to see, is there a cop up here? Is there an accident? And I didn't realize that he was thinking, oh, no, not a cop, not on a rural road. Oh, no, oh, no. And then, as we moved, we were laughing like, oh, it's just a turtle. And nobody wanted to run over this turtle and the turtle family. So, I mean, the last thing he wanted to see was a cop in that situation. Yeah.
So there was, you get through that and you all have a conversation. And I want to read a portion of this article that kind of explains where Jay is coming from. And to the audience, Jay keeps it real. So there are a couple of expletives in the copy. However, I will be abbreviating those. So because we are on the air. But Desiree, you ask him, what does it feel like to be arrested? I asked Jay a few nights after our drive. It's the scariest thing that can ever happen to you, he said. When they tell you to get out of your car, they search your car, they put you in the back of the cruiser. All you can think is what's going to happen now. I was just on my way to work or to the store, and now they're going to throw me in jail with a murderer. It's pure helplessness. When they say, put your hands behind your back, that's when the bleep hits the fan, he continued. Because I'm black, they see me as dangerous. They think I have something hidden. They call 5 cops for backup. It feels like they're ready to take you out. He told me about the humiliation of being stopped for a minor traffic infraction and being commanded out of the car while passersby gawked. People driving by look and see me being arrested and they must think, wow, he must have robbed someone, he said. When I see those flashing lights, I become 2 people. At first I think, what did I do wrong? What's about to happen to me? But then I think, F you. It was the first time I'd seen his rage. I have battled with myself, he continued. I say that I hate all cops, but how can that be true? I know cops who I deeply respect, but over the years, do you ever wonder if you really did do something wrong, something a long time ago that you forgot about? When you're in the back of the cruiser and they're talking in all this code and punching stuff in the computer, you wonder what they found out. You really start trying to remember what you did to deserve the way you're being treated. What does it feel like to wear handcuffs? It hurts your wrists. They are very tight. And your shoulders ache. You're off balance with your hands tied like that. You can't maneuver. I waited, holding my breath. I was devastated that as a mother, I hadn't been able to save him from any of that. Sad that people had treated my baby that way. Sad that we had never talked about it. He gave a wry laugh. I can't even watch those shows like Cops anymore, he said. It's too real. I have PTSD. And then he looked at me, his child eyes shimmering from his grown man's face. Hey, Ma, you remember when you put those handcuffs on me? How did you react when he said that?
I stopped for a minute. I think everything stopped. I think my heart stopped, my breathing stopped.
Wow.
And I said, yeah, I remember. And then we just talked about that moment and what it was. But my hope against all hope that he wouldn't remember, that it wouldn't remain important to him, is not what happened.
Mm-hmm.
It was a formative experience for him, and I had done it, and it was not easy for me to live with. He wasn't angry, thank God.
Yeah.
Or maybe that comes later. I don't know. But he did not forget.
Des, what do you want to say to other mothers out there who are raising sons, who have grown sons? I know every mother says, okay, our goal is to raise them upright and get them grown and let them go live their lives, and that'll be wonderful. And then when you have a grown son who tells you, Mom, I've got PTSD. I'm trying to deal with this. What do you want to say to them?
Well, we definitely got to validate it. I think we have an issue with Black manhood because culturally there's so much about be tough, suck it up. This is for all men, and I think for Black men in particular, there's sort of the pressure to stand up, fight back, and protect when they can, and we don't let them be vulnerable, and we don't let them express weakness. We conflate emotion with their sexuality or sexual orientation. Those things are very separate and not connected, and it shouldn't matter either way. and therefore, it's like a pray about it or don't talk about it. And I think as parents of these children, we have PTSD. This is what I discovered. I had PTSD, and sitting there trying to process it with him, I realized how much pain was sitting between us that had gone unresolved. And so if your child is going through something and you're going through it on the other end at the same time, get your stuff together, but then revisit that for your child or get it together. Get help. Talk to people.
Absolutely.
And, we look at like a Kanye now. I mean, this is like way off what we're talking about, but you look at mental illness untreated and how far out it can go and how family is not helping or can't help.
Mm-hmm.
And we cannot let all of our men stand on that ledge and just hope they figure out how not to fall over it.
Absolutely.
That is too much. That is too much. And as mothers, George Floyd called his mother.
Yep.
There's something, and she was not even alive, but he knew he could help her wherever she would come for him.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think that as mothers, there is a way that we navigate the feminine and the masculine, that we navigate the worlds of emotion and rationality, and that we navigate practicality and dream all the time. And we gave birth to people, so we have to hope for them.
Absolutely.
So there's something that we've got to do to get our crap together so that we can be there for them when they need us most. And that is not cracking down on them, and that is not, it's not the blockbuster mom that we want. We don't want the blockbuster mom. We want the mom that years later are sitting having heartfelt conversations. What did you feel? What did you go through? What do you need to get past this or to integrate this? That conversation we had about what is our role in this, because we were both feeling powerless. And I will say, after this came out, we got phone calls from family friends that we hadn't talked to in years, called to talk to him, not to me as the writer, but to him, saying, Jay, thank you for sharing that and for being open. It was a therapeutic process that we finally got to. And thank God, this was an avenue for that for us. That we finally got to a place where we both were able to admit how deep this hurt is and not pretend that it isn't there.
Yeah. Let's go to Amy in Smithfield. Hi, Amy. You're on the air.
Hi. Hello. I'm going to try and be brief and articulate. This is a very emotional, painful, just painful topic when I listen to this woman speak as a mother of how you have to start with your children and your boys at such a young age to prepare them for what just this ridiculous, horrific society. I'm a white woman, and I have always been frustrated with what you hear in white society all the time with young boys. The expression you hear, boys will be boys. They get away with everything. Boys will be boys. Oh, that's how boys are going to be. That's what white boys learn. And just look, conversely, I think that you can reduce it down to just that, from what mothers tell their children, from what society expects of these little children from the beginning. It shows where they're headed in the future. I mean, it really, mothers, white mothers as well, you have to start with your children at a young age. No, it's not acceptable behavior. We must be kind to one another and respect one another. You are responsible for what you put out there. And to think that so many children are told and they're written off and they're given free rein, boys will be boys, white boys. And then this mother speaking of her black child and having to prepare him for these things. It's gut-wrenching.
Thank you, Amy, for your call. We really appreciate that. Des, you want to respond?
Oh, I appreciate her comments so much. I mean, one thing, this is something that John Lewis talked about, and that is we are all victims of racism, of hatred. Even the perpetrators are victims. You're a bully when you're afraid of not being one. You're afraid of being the one that gets kicked, so you kick instead. And so, and those people are not allowed to be whole human beings either. And it's painful for them. So I think Amy is right on. It starts really young, and it starts with the constraints that we put on the spirits of our children.
Yeah. How's Jay?
Oh, he's better. He's a naturally optimistic and hopeful human being, and I am not. So it is nothing but a miracle that we are here together at this time. I learn a lot from him. So he's doing pretty good.
That's good. That's good. So, Des, I want to ask you, do you, I keep hearing over and over, this time is different. This time feels different. This time we're going to make a difference. Do you feel that? What do you think?
I do. I do. Because, I said this when the first Black Lives Matter protests happened years ago. I was like, what? There's white people out there. Like, what are they doing there? This is our party. This is our anger. And I said, even back then, the next time is going to be real different because a lot of people have been pushed, and a lot of people are seeing what we've been saying for such a long time. And I think that's borne out. When you look at what's happening in Portland now, I mean, it's moved from city to city, Minneapolis and Atlanta. But when you look at Portland, my goodness, where are the Black people? And then you see the military willing to oppress white people in the way they have done Black people. Well, now this is a new day, and I think that's why there's a brand new role for whites to play in terms of relearning history and holding each other accountable. And I think that there's a lot who are willing to do that. They are showing up, and they're putting their lives on the line, and they are willing to learn and make mistakes and learn some more together.
Yeah.
So the pushback is bigger and broader. It's not a spectator sport this time. And I think that's what's different.
That's really interesting. I'm curious about Jay and his sister. Did they have conversations, or do they have conversations about this and about Jay's experiences?
Well, now you got me in another therapy idea. Let me think. Let me put it to you this way. They are joined at the hip. If they have not had that conversation, I would be shocked.
Gotcha.
What their conversations are, I don't know. And quiet as it's kept, my daughter has been harassed as well, and she's been arrested as well.
And I'm glad you brought that point out, because while we were talking about Jay, because the article focuses on him, we are by no means eliminating the fact that African American women go through this also, and girls.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yes. And they have, this is another show, they have the sexual exploitations and pressures on them that has a whole nother layer that exposes them to, abuse and sexual violence. So, yeah, my daughter too. So I'm sure that they have compared notes, and they've always been there for each other. So I'm sure they have commiserated together and processed some things together. I'm glad they have each other, because one thing I did learn in the conversation with Jay is that I don't know everything, right? We all have protected our parents from the truth, from our truth. And that's one thing that they have both done, is I don't even know every run-in that they have had. So I'm just glad they're here alive with me now.
Yeah.
I
am really happy to hear you be optimistic. I'm a senior too, as you put it out there at the top of the show. And I remember vividly the late 60s and those riots in the 70s and everything that happened. And, as I think about John Lewis and Reverend Vivian and others who, were marching in the streets, and I believe I've heard a quote that Reverend Vivian was saying, you know what, I'm tired and it's time for your young folks to take over. And that's what's happening, just to seeing the activism and the passion of young folks today. So do you think after the pandemic, Jay may get out there and
he would be, even in his compromised situation, if he didn't have his mother saying, no, you're not, he would be out there right now. He definitely. And I think he will also be out there as a healer. I think he is growing into that idea of a role for himself.
That is great.
And isn't it funny that, the pandemic locked all of us old folks behind closed doors? Like, if there was going to be a protest with us, it wouldn't be that many of us there. So it's almost like we couldn't.
Absolutely.
Just so that we could sit there and see, who else was there. I have been in those conversations. I don't know what's going on today. These millennials, blah, blah, blah. We have been complaining, and meanwhile, they've been listening to each other's music. They've been eating globally. They've been worried about the climate. They have not had a good year since they were in high school. They lived through 9/11. They lived through the mortgage crisis, the Great Recession, Trump. They haven't had too many good years.
And yet they rise, just like we did, right? Exactly.
Why? We didn't realize their training.
Exactly. We're out of time, Des. I can't believe it. As always, talking to you is so wonderful. That is author Desiree Cooper. She is the author of Know the Mother. And please check out her essay, Arrest Record. And thank you for sharing, and thank you for listening to this edition of Another View. You can find all of our shows on our website, anotherviewradio.org. Please sign up for our eView newsletter. It's a once-a-week reminder of upcoming shows. We're on Facebook, so like us, and I'm on Twitter at Barbara Ham Lee. Next week on Another View, Dr. Keith Newby is back. Yay! And he's hopping mad, y'all, about how some are ignoring safety measures to stop the spread of coronavirus. You won't want to miss this conversation. Our theme music was composed and performed by Jay Sennett. Lisa Godley is our show producer. Todd Washburn is our audio engineer, and Dr. Barry Graham answered our phones. I'm Barbara Ham Lee. Wear a mask, wash your hands, stay socially distant, and join us again next Thursday at noon for Another View.